Hello and welcome to part two of Leadership and Sport, Sports Psychology screencast. If you have a look on the stuff in green here, you can see that in the last screencast we had a look at the following key areas: characteristics of effective leaders, emergent or prescribed leaders, leadership styles. And then we had a look at kind of where the leadership characteristics come from in terms of the theories. Now I've told you kind of in the previous screencast or in lessons, you're looking at this focus that these theories transcend sports psychology, but certainly with regard to individual differences such as aggression, such as personality. So it's really important that we have an understanding of how you explain where different areas of sports psychology come from according to these theories. In this case, it was obviously leadership. So the topic for today is going to be the multidimensional model of leadership. And what this basically means when it says multidimensional, it's basically saying, if you have a leadership style, such as kind of autocratic, democratic, whatever, okay, it's saying that you do not have this leadership style all the time, because that will be unidimensional, one-dimensional, e.g. you'll only use autocratic. This model proposes that, the leadership style you use will be dictated by certain changing variables. And those key variables basically have a look at that your leadership behavior being dependent upon the situation the leader or the group is in. So, for example, if the leader is in an extremely dangerous situation with a group, okay, this might lead to the fact, or it's an extremely large group in a dangerous situation, that you probably remember from last lesson would mean they're more likely to use autocratic style of leadership. If you go down from there, another variable would be the characteristics of the leader themselves. So, for example, if that leader is extremely experienced, this might mean that they feel confident in a certain style of leadership. Finally, the characteristics of the group members. So if you have a group of beginners, okay, somebody who they've never took part in an activity before and it's dangerous up to the situation, and the group members are very, very inexperienced or young, this might mean that you think, right, obviously autocratic is going to be the style that I'm going to use here. So they are the three variables that will dictate leadership behavior, and that is depicted via a model which is called the multidimensional model of leadership. So before we do that, just so you can see kind of where we're going to be heading with this is an exam paper or exam question on the topic most recently, and I've kind of put some annotations on, well, I haven't put them, they're from a student's paper from last year. So the question would look something like this. It gives you a scene setter showing what it is, so the multidimensional model. And down here, using examples from physical activity and sport, explain how effective leadership can be achieved according to the model. Now, I've kind of told you before when we looked at Veely's model of sports confidence, when you see a model, you're 99% likely to get the model. When you see the model, it's vital that you can kind of differentiate or discriminate yourself from people who are just going to repeat the model. So what you have to do is make sure that you can translate each part of that model into a descriptor, and then hopefully example it, and then I will show you how we kind of relate the different parts of it. So you've had a quick look at it there. I just wanted to say, so you can go back to this if you want at the end of the screencast and just start to see how you feel with regard to answering it. So that's the overview. That's the exam question. That was a 6-mark question, okay, and I'll show you exactly how you go about getting the marks for that. As you can see, the student here has basically started to translate, and then they go down to this section. So that is kind of you can see they've done it. That's what you need to be able to do by the end of the screencast. So from here then, this is your model. So if I can just, you might want to pause it now, just make sure you've got a picture of the model to start with. You will get everything that is in here except the bit in red. Okay, so what I've got onto here then, so if we've got a kind of multidimensional model of leadership, the title's here. What we're looking for then is basically saying that there are certain antecedents or variables that will dictate the actual behavior that the leader does. So the kind of antecedents, the causes of leader behavior go down here, and I kind of mentioned those before. Okay, so the example we're going to use throughout this, we're going to use an example of a rock climbing trip or expedition with young school children. So the first time they've gone rock climbing, you might remember going to outdoor adventure centres, Lanrig, whatever, and this is the kind of scenario we're going to use. And so it gives us the opportunity to provide a best fit example. Now, once you've got the best fit example, you might decide you want to use a different example in the exam, but I'm saying this is the one that makes it easiest to interpret. We can have a look at other scenarios in the lesson for those people who want to make their examples concrete to them and make sure they understand them. So let's go have a look at what we're talking about there. What we're going to do is basically have a look at how this model, with the direct box on the left, will laterally influence the box on the right. So first up, the first part of this model is basically just looking at these 6 boxes. We've got to learn to translate them into a sentence. We've got to then give an example. Then we've got to talk about how this arrow is going there, how it directly impacts the box adjacent to it. So let's have a look. Situational characteristics then, how do we translate that? They basically refer to the environmental circumstances that the leader finds himself in. So for example, they're leading a dangerous rock climbing activity. So that is the key kind of example. I've given you an example there, but you've got to point is on there. You've got to explain an example each section. Now, if you're in a dangerous rock climbing activity, this will directly impact the required behaviour, and this is the most suitable behaviour that the leader should use. So in this case, the most suitable leader behaviour would certainly say that if it's so dangerous, we know from our previous study that autocratic is the best because it would increase the safety of the activity. Okay, so that is the required behaviour. For example, on rock climbing or walking on a mountain, so you stand 1 metre behind the other person, do not go near the edge. You are telling them exactly what to do. You're not allowing them to say, right, off you go. You can decide now. Why don't you go and have a decide where you run? Okay, go on, just go and see if you can kind of hang over the edge. You would not do that. Okay, so you've got to make sure that you kind of make sure that your example is autocratic because it increased safety. Now, let's go down. Leader characteristics, and this basically refers to the age, experience, kind of personality, these individual characteristics of the leader. Okay, so for example, as a best fit process here, we're going to say that the example is that they're an experienced leader. Now, this then will directly impact the experience of that leader. For example, they're experienced rock climbing instructor. They've done 50 expeditions, and now what we've got to do, that will directly impact their actual behaviour. So what the leader decides to do. So our key translation is what the leader decides to do. And he thinks in this situation, or they think in this situation that, right, autocratic is going to be the best style. I am experienced and I know that it's a kind of a dangerous activity. So I'm going with autocratic, and eventually this will increase the trust of the kind of performers because they will feel that kind of, in this dangerous situation, the leader knows what they're talking about. They're experienced, therefore autocratic is going to make us trust what they're saying. Okay, so that's our second. So we've done box 1 into box 2, box 3 into box 4. Now we're going into box 4 into box 5. So the member characteristics, very similar to leader characteristics. This talks about the age, experience of the group. Okay, so in this case, we've got an inexperienced young group of rock climbers. Okay, maybe year 5, year 6, year 7, whichever one you want to do. Just keep that in your head. Okay, and you look at that and think, if you are year 5, you are year 6, you are year 7, and you're in that situation, you're right next to a kind of a cliff edge. You're probably going to want the leader to be strict in this case because you might be scared, about falling off the edge, or there's always some irritating little child at the back trying to push people or trip people up. You'd probably want the leader, if you were in the majority, to be very autocratic. So if you look at this now, so that when you talk about the preferred behaviour, what the group favours. That's the key translation. And in this case, the majority of the group would favour autocratic leadership because and he put this as a term, it wins the heart and minds. So the minds, they feel safe. The heart, they feel like that they can trust the leader, and this is the kind of descriptor that kind of comes out in examiner's report. Okay, so that will be the kind of focus there. If we can kind of keep that, it's a little bit cheesy, but just make sure you keep that in your mind and keep it, as a focus of the things you need to get into the exam answer. So I'm very aware that people will look at this and think, oh, I can think of other things. Understand what I'm saying here. This is a best fit example that focuses on a kind of scenario that makes it really easy to apply autocratic leadership behaviour. And I think, if we do that, it stops people getting confused in the first instance, and then we can look at changing that from there. Now, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, that isn't where the model finishes, because what it's saying then, if we've done this and that influences that, leader characteristics influence actual behaviour. Member characteristics influence preferred behaviour. Okay, so what the group favours. Now, what we now need to do then is say these leader behaviours. Okay, we need to have a look at how they combine to kind of lead to the most effective leadership. Okay, so what we've got then, you look here the kind of consequences of these leader behaviours and how they combine here, okay, basically will lead to either a level of performance, satisfaction. Performance will increase, so that's how well you do, the outcome. Satisfaction, how good you feel about doing it. Or it might be both. Now, obviously, the kind of best focus here is that we have a combination of the leader behaviour leading to the group performance increasing and also the group satisfaction increasing. So we have to maybe now go across to these 3 boxes. This would not be in the model that you get, but this is how you get the higher marks for this. So first consequence then, if required behaviour and actual behaviour match, then performance will increase. So if the most suitable behaviour matches or combines with what the leader decides to do, there's a massive chance you're going to be successful. E.g., you're going to get to the top of the mountain faster, okay, so in this situation. So that might be an example to put onto there. Now, I'm sure you can see that. So often, you know, you might not always like what the leader is asking you to do, for example, but you know that it's the most suitable thing to do in that situation. Dangerous, you want to get to the top, and this means that your performance getting to the top of the mountain would increase. Now, on top of that, if you go down to the bottom here, if actual behaviour matches preferred behaviour, so if these two, 1 and 2, match, okay, this will mean that the satisfaction will increase. So if the leader decides to do what you favour them to do, this is going to make you feel satisfied. You might not always do it kind of perfectly, but you think, I'm satisfied because what I favoured, what the group favoured, the leader did. So that makes you feel happy. It makes you feel intrinsically motivated, and you feel quite happy with that. So you could see that hopefully will make you feel you can understand that section. Now, of course, that's fine, but the ultimate condition for kind of effective leadership basically refers to how this actual behaviour actually matches with not only required behaviour or not only preferred behaviour, but both. And if that happens, you have the ultimate climate for effective leadership. So if required behaviour, preferred behaviour and actual behaviour match, then both performance and satisfaction will increase. And this focus, kind of when all 3 leader behaviours match, is called congruence, or it's congruent, as you can see there, not to be confused with consonance, which remember is when all 3 attitude components agree. So congruence or congruent. Okay, so that basically talks about when actual behaviour, what the leader decides to do, matches with this required behaviour and preferred behaviour. So if you're in a group, what the leader is telling you that you favour that, you wanted to do that anyway, and also you perform really well, well, of course, that's going to mean that you it's the ultimate, you enjoy that, and you're more likely to participate in it as you go on. Now, there's one final thing I just want to talk about here, and that will basically refer to the fact that a leader, the best leaders, demonstrate the skill of flexibility that we talked about in the interactionist theory of leadership. So a leader who is best will be flexible to both the situation and the characteristics of the group, okay? And that is kind of talking about how you can switch your leadership style from autocratic to democratic depending upon either the situation or the member characteristics. So that is your model, okay? Make sure you've got good notes on that. I've tried to avoid giving multiple examples so we can keep it basic in our brain to start with and then start to build it up from there. I would ask you, before you come into the lesson, or if you're using this as a revision screencast, just to have a look at the next slide and have a go, see how much you can fill in, and this would be a nice little check to see what you've took in from there. Okay, so have a go at that. Thank you very much.